I am essentially nothing to do with BIM, and I'll explain that in a moment. I am sort of representing in this your sort of, I don't know, Joe FM or Josephine or FM or however you want to put it. I'm kind of, I'll explain in a moment. I am ex of the FM world. I'm sort of still in the FM world, but in a very different capacity. And I've been watching this thing unfold. My first interest and my first dabblings with BIM was around 2013 in a very particular sort of inquiring capacity. And it left me really excited, and it left me asking questions at that point. And it's really interesting to stand here in 2016 after the Level 2 mandate has come and gone. Would that be fair? Am I saying the right wording? Yeah. And kind of going, okay, so what's this all about then? So in terms of what we're going to do a bit of what is BIM, which we've kind of done already, but let's just pause and go back and reflect on it. We're going to explore this holy trinity of the REBA Planner Works, the government soft landings, and this BIM thing, and talk about what that might mean. But what I really want to do with you, one of my master's students at Sheffield Hallam has done a dissertation on this year, a dissertation on the perceived opportunities and benefits versus the challenges of BIM from an NHS FM perspective. And there's some really interesting messages in there for us to think about. And this is all good and well, but this is the what. And we've got to get to the, all right, so what? So what might we do about this? What does this mean? And, does that take us to a bit of a fresh perspective? So this is me, and I kind of, my past life, I've been at my first degree, natural science. My second degree, kind of in and around social science. My third degree, my doctorate, when I write the damn thing up, it's more sociological than anything else. So there's a real progression in kind of questioning from kind of black and white to shades of grey to the way organisations use information and make decisions and stuff like that. I've been an accidental FM for 10 years. I've been in-house. I've been outsourced. We're all accidental FM somehow. That's the way the industry is. And I kind of do all of these things. And as I said in the opening debate this morning, what I'm really interested in is what matters to people. When we step away from all of this industry jargon and all the things that we're supposed to be doing, or we're told we should be doing, what genuinely matters to people, that's the stuff that makes me tick and that gets me out of bed in the morning. So for the next week and a half, I'm employed by Sheffield Hallam University. And then after that, I'm out on my ear because I've made a choice to go into the big wide world. I'm a partner of an organisation called 3 Edges, and I've got a 6-month contract with Loughborough University to explore the relationship between workplace and technology and that big question about are the robots coming to take our jobs in a much more nuanced and intelligent way than some of the headlines that are out there right now. So I'm not going to do the big sell on 3 Edges because you can all read, but what I will say while you're having a quick look at that slide is it's that bit about my bread and butter is workplace. My passion is workplace. What genuinely matters to people, and how can we make things better for people and for organisations? And when I had an opportunity to come and speak at this event, I could have done another workplace session. But I thought, you know what? If we have this interest in data and technology and BIM and workplace, I'm fairly sure that they've all got some quite sophisticated sort of systemic links. But let's push my boundaries. Let's talk about BIM for a change and see what happens. Bearing in mind the last time I talked about it at a conference was 2013. So let's see what we've got. But one thing that I will point out in all of this is the Workplace Matters podcast will be launching soon. There isn't a good podcast out there about workplace, and that's about to change. In fact, I think by Christmas there'll be 3 or 4, but Workplace Matters will be one of them. So if you see it bouncing around the social media, you're going to hear my voice on it and some of my partners, some of my partner colleagues. So it's a bit like this for me when it comes to BIM. There's this thing that's important. We kind of, in some respects, we seem to talk like it's a given and we know what it is. But from an FM operational perspective, from people trying to come to the party, if you like, and benefit from this on behalf of the users, what actually is this all about? So this is, I was kind of assuming a slightly larger group and I was assuming a group of very different sort of abilities and perspectives on BIM, but let's still just do this thing. Just turn to the person next to you and I'm going to give you, a minute just to, in a sentence, what would you say BIM was? And there's no right or wrong answers, obviously, but some might be more right than others. Let's come back into the room then, folks. So it's always music to my ears when you get a conference group actually having a conversation, because it happens so rarely when there's somebody stood at the front and there's a bunch of seats all lined up in rows. So would anybody like to just have a go? The sentence that you came up with? The nugget that it makes sense to you as? Everybody except Paul can answer this one. Or, I was going to use that to shut you up, but I didn't need to. So, look at these definitions, okay? Or comments about what BIM is from different sources. An emerging technology, a 3D-based information system, a process of generating, storing, managing, exchanging and sharing building information. That was quite close, I think, to the stuff that you were talking about. A collaborative way for working underpinned by digital technologies. Paul's frowning at that one, that's quite interesting. BIM gets people and information to work together, said DRICS. Data as a living asset, from a chap who was talking about BIM at Think FM about 3 years ago. Which ones resonates most or less strongly with you? Because they're all saying some really quite different stuff.
All of the above, I guess, in some ways, some cases, I guess. But
I think the thing for me is one of the things I said about what's been for me is it's about an understanding, but these are more about data and the actual physical.
Okay.
Not necessarily so much. I mean, you've kind of got some stuff about there about process and but for me it's it's a way of understanding the environment, the building, and the process and the way it works.
Okay. Brilliant. Let's park it there then, and let's move on, because what a lovely way to capture it. I mean, when I was pulling this slide together, I certainly feel this resonance around some of the sort of the middle comments, and I'll explain why as we go. But it's, do you get this picture now? Do you get why I'm putting this picture up? The fable of the 5 blind monks and the elephant? Do you know what I'm talking about? So I quite like this one because it's quite hard. It's sort of one of those pictures that's quite hard to decipher. But they're all encountering an elephant from a completely different perspective. If you meet its ear, it's a fan, and if you meet its tail, to a blind person, it's a piece of rope. If you meet its leg, it's a tree trunk. If you meet its side, it's a wall. And there's this thing going on in the industry, which when Paul very kindly there was a slide in there which. It said modelling, management, and it sort of nailed from a reasonably first position what this stuff is. But so often when people come in and talk about BIM, and they're normally from a supply side, they come in and they kind of lay down everything that's going on with it without ever explaining what the thing is and what it's about, and therefore what the benefits of this all might be. And I was listening to a little podcast. I'm quite obsessed with podcasts. I was listening to a little podcast about BIM a few weeks ago. The very first episode of this, just a few American colleagues on a conference call having fairly regular update conversations about BIM. And they said, the thing was actually going to be called Building Information Management, but it got called Building Information Modelling. And it makes me really reflect on if the name had been slightly different, would it have changed everything? So we're on now to this notion of this, what I call the Holy Trinity. So we've got BIM, but we've also got this thing called government soft landings, and we've got this thing called the REBA Plan of Work 2013. Are you all familiar with all three of those things? Yeah?
I'm not familiar with the REBA one.
Okay, so we're going to unfold these together, because for me, I guess my punchline to this little section is, the only way this makes sense is when you think about all three of them together. And in terms of the research that I'm going to share with you from James up at Sheffield Hallam University, James, when he was putting his literature review together for his master's dissertation, he unearthed this understanding, which is they work together. The whole point is they allow you to move differently within a system. And so he went out looking for conversations about this and whether there was an awareness of this. And there wasn't. which is kind of quite interesting. We'll get to that a bit in a minute. So the REBA Plan of Works is, what's the easiest way to sum this up in a sentence? It's kind of like the guidebook for, if an architectural brief is being put together, you can say, I want a strategic definition and a preparation brief, but I don't want to move to a concept design yet. Or, you can almost specify the project in terms of the REBA plan, the stages you want to go to. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is it used to be, what have I got next here? Yeah, it used to be, was it A to L? Is that right? About right, isn't it? Something like that. And it's been A to L since 1963. I'm pretty sure, I think, or at least it's been broadly A to L since 1963. And because of the changes in the system, in 2013, REBA introduced a new plan of works. They revised it from stages 0 to 7. And now let's turn our attention to FM. Let's say we represent FM. FM used to engage with the plan of works at handover when those O&M manuals were delivered in a wheelbarrow. And the change in the system, if you like, is because of the expectations of BIM now, it completely shifts the conversation and it allows FM to enter the conversation right at the very beginning and at successive stages for successive reasons as you move through it. And I'm sort of thinking about this, my head works a little bit like this. You might argue that GSL does exactly the same thing, but government soft landings allows FM to come almost forward in the expectation so that the handover isn't a wheelbarrow full of O&M manuals to be sort of flippant and trite. It's something much more powerful. So all of a sudden you've got this opportunity for FM to share the conversation every step of the way. And this is a qualitative observation at this point. So far so good? All right with me on this? Okay, so this is what I'm thinking. Okay, so let's say that's what we were expecting to find. So when James, one of my dissertation supervisions, went out there, proposed what he wanted to study, and went out there, and he went out to talk to, senior but operational hard services guys in the NHS, broadly in the Yorkshire region, because that was the demographic he chose to access, and he could access quickly. And he went out seeking open conversations, semi-structured interviews. So what are the perceived benefits and the potential challenges of BIM? And what he found, reservations, misunderstanding, a real operational focus. It's something which it's beyond us and it's out of our comfort zone, and we can't get to it for the day job, and we haven't got the resources to do it. And he found no mention or awareness of GSL or REBA's plan of work. So it was over as this technological panacea which they couldn't even work out if it was going to be useful or not. And they're probably going to have to be retrofitted, and how on earth would they find the time to do it? And there's a bit more detail to this. James kind of coded it. The themes that emerged were around knowledge, process and technology. They were challenges, they were barriers, they weren't likely to afford implementation. And we got thinking like this. We got thinking that, well, what's underneath this stuff? And there's no question of the technological potential, but the biggest barrier here is this cultural and behavioural bit. And we got thinking about, socio-technical theory's been around since the 70s just as a framework, as a thinking tool to think about this. But you've got structure, you've got all the things in a social system, and you've got all the things in a technical system. And socio-technical theory says the only way this stuff works effectively is together. And it felt like all the conversations around BIM, when you come to the events, when you're trying to learn about it, they're kind of over there and they sort of bleed into that bit. But there's hardly a nod in that direction. And it's almost like that's where the breakdown is in all of this, and how do we do something about that? So that's all quite interesting. And the bit that really nailed this for me is I was at a Steel City BIM, a Sheffield BIM evening event only a month ago. And Elliot Crosley, he was like a rock star architect. He was like skinny and dressed in black, and he had long hair, and he was really cool. And he kept putting this very not me, because I'm sort of short and I've got a potato-shaped bald head. So I was like, Elliot's cool, right? And he kept putting this picture of a croissant up. And it's like, why is he putting a croissant on it? And he didn't, like, and the punchline was, as far as he's concerned, all of the technical stuff is happening, and all of those things that Paul essentially incredibly versed in and showed us just before lunch, they all happen, but as a platform for collaboration. And so the symbolic thing of the croissant, they created weekly, almost rituals which promoted people actually coming together, which, if you think back to Jason's case study, if you were here at the beginning of the day, that's what we saw evidence of happening. So this thing sort of stitches together. So we're into the closing stages now, we're into the so what of all of this. Well, there are phenomenal opportunities. We've explored the making sure we're focusing on outcomes and not design. Paul, you unfolded that just before lunch. Our opportunity is that we represent the business. I think we know that, but how do we genuinely, truly embody that? Now, these two things are really, really easy to say. And if I'm going to be really bold, and this is quite a controversial little analogy or metaphor, whatever the right word is, but for me, the most powerful thing for BIM, for FM, is that it's a Trojan horse. It allows us to get to the front, okay, and change the shape of the conversation. But it's all good and well saying that. What's really interesting is we're always locked in that rhetoric of poor FM, right? If only they'd listen to us. What I learned when I did a BIM competition was that, isn't it funny that lots of other disciplines are saying exactly the same stuff too? This is a message about collaboration needs to improve. It's not a message that somebody's less powerful than another or less favoured than another. It's that we can have a different conversation about that. And so this competition, have you ever been, the fastest way to learn powerfully about the power of, terrible sentence, the fastest way to be convinced of the power of BIM is to get involved in one of these competitions. Has anybody ever done one? So it's like a real-time, Paul, are you sort of nodding? Okay, so this one, it's a, you get collaborative groups prepared to give up a day to work on a real-time problem. So you've got 12 hours to bring a building out of the ground to a design brief, to start putting some services into it, to run some clash detection, to try this, to try that, to run some different programs over the top of it to see how it might respond to wind load and stuff like that. But what you've got there is it's like a free training event. It's like the most powerful, fast-forward way to understand the power of the conversation, underpinned by the technology that you could ever have. And these things are happening. There's like, they get funny names like BIM Dubai, don't they, and BIM New York, and it's not that they're out there, it's that people are coming together on these collaborative competitions. They're like scrums sort of thing to explore how this thing all works together. And there's lots of quotes around the outside from all these different professions and all these different organisations. It's like this wonderful little piece of positivity. So another really good friend of mine, how long have I got? A really good friend of mine is a chap called Steve Owen, who works for FM 180, which is a BIM for FM consultant. And he uses this lovely little phraseology, which is FM's role, if we think about clash detection in a traditional sense, is, that pipe's supposed to go through that wall at a particular place, and is it going to, or have we got a problem? He says, your role is operational clash detection. You represent the business, and your lens is, will this building work for the business? And with that mindset, at all those different places in the plan of works, you can do different things, you can add value in different ways. Because this is what it's all in service of. We are trying to do this stuff for some really genuine reasons, but there are real challenges to this, because this is a very rose-tinted message, okay? If you're not very intelligent and you get shuffled to the front of the queue and invited to the table, then you're going to look really unintelligent really, really quickly. So how do you tool up for that? And, BIFM doesn't solve bottlenecks, it just moves them to different locations, so you have to be ready for that thing to happen. You're always going to have those challenges of how do we fit this in, how do we get this above and beyond the day job. And I think there's a real risk. If we battle to sort of say we can add value in a real organisational business output sense, well, is there a risk that we then become re-entrenched as a technical discipline? And that's really tricky, depending upon the different perspectives. I'm going to bounce past those and bounce past those because they kind of emphasise the point. So what I'm trying to say in closing is, for me, this is a really aspirational message. We can do different stuff with BIM if we change the shape of the conversation. And here's my little parting shot. I always do this about FM. Who's that? Come on, you're all old enough to know. Who's that chap? Really? All right, who's that chap? I have never had an audience that doesn't recognise Hong Kong Fooey. Hong Kong Fooey. So that's Penry, the mild-mannered janitor. Okay? That's Hong Kong Fooey. How you think about FM and how you think about the way it contributes, they are two entirely different mindsets. And the aspirational piece and BIM and workplace and all the things that we can affect for organisations for the greater good, it lives over there. So 3 key takeaways, okay? Less technical, more social, intertwined. This idea of operational class detection, that's our contribution and we need to tool up for it. Don't expect an invite to the conversation. Change the conversation. Change the shape of what we're trying to achieve. And one last thought for you to think on. Gil Scott Heron, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. A lovely little piece about thinking differently.